going to air it out down the field. Catch and a touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. First edition of the 2021 season. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. It is great to be back and a little bit earlier in September this season. No delays. College football getting off on time this season. We have a full schedule ahead on the docket, and it's good to be back. If you've watched college football over the first week plus, you go back to week 0 last week, and you saw some of the games on Thursday and Friday. It seems like we are back to normal, full crowds, wild plays, crazy comebacks, and obviously some devastating injuries already. So we're going to dive into all of that, of course, later in the show. We'll be previewing this week's games. I'll give you my 5-pack of picks, as I did last season as well. We got off to a pretty hot start in 2020, and then basically stumbled along the way, if you will, and then we picked it back up later in the season. Not too shabby, but finished about, a game or two under 500. So we were about in the red last year, almost broke even. So we're going to try to do better for you guys in terms of these picks so you guys can put some money in your pockets as well. Got a lot of big-time games here today starting at noon, of course, going throughout the day. And it just seems like college football just really loaded up the schedule this season, particularly in the beginning. We didn't have non-conference matchups, out-of-conference matchups last season due to the COVID-19 protocols where everybody took or kept their schedules within the conference. For example, the Big Ten, it was Big Ten only, SEC only, and so on and so forth. But now you have games like LSU and UCLA, which we'll talk about later, Georgia and Clemson, which is a potential playoff preview already, Alabama, Miami. You just have some great games already on the docket. Heck, we're going to talk about it later as well. Louisiana and Texas. That's right, the Raging Cajuns taking on the new-look Texas Longhorns as well. So I'm looking forward to a stellar weekend of college football, and of course my Rutgers Scarlet Knights are going to be playing at noon today after being delayed. And there was if you didn't hear about the Hurricane Ida ripping through the southern United States, and it came up through Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. At that point, there was way too much flooding, and of course, they had to postpone that game. They're hosting Temple. Saw that game, by the way, for my Scarlet Knights, but they postponed it due to the flooding, so they'll kick off at noon today. As far as what happened already this week, the big news is definitely Ohio State, and if you want to talk about teams that are bound for the college football playoff already, and this is where I do want to start here today, the college football playoff, whenever it gets expanded, whether it's going to be 8 teams or 12 teams, the biggest problem with it right now is you're going to see the same 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 teams be in the conversation every single year. Now, while I don't think those teams being in contention every year is a bad thing, the problem is there's no competition for those teams to not get in. And the teams I'm referring to are in the Big Ten, Ohio State, in the SEC, Alabama, and in this case, for this year, Georgia. That's 3 already. The ACC, it's Clemson. There's your 4. And then you go to the Big 12, it's Oklahoma. That's 5 teams right there. And then if you want to throw Texas A&M in there as well, so that's 6. But then right there, out of those 6 teams, you have 3 teams from the SEC. And in case you're living under a rock this summer, the SEC decided to expand, and they're going to add 2 more teams within the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, heck, it could be earlier, but it's expected to be done by 2025. They added Texas and Oklahoma, and I just mentioned Oklahoma, so if you already put Oklahoma in the SEC, 4 of the 6 teams I just mentioned are in the SEC. That is a competition problem. Now, is it the fault of the SEC? No. Is it the fault of the SEC that they're going to expand and add those 2 stalwart Big 12 programs? No, not necessarily. But this is why I think college football went to these these non-conference games, such as the LSU, UCLA games of the world. Having Georgia play Clemson today, and then I've already made the argument that the loser of today's game between Georgia and Clemson is not going to make the playoff this year. And ultimately, that could be a good thing. Now, of course, a lot would have to break right for that to happen. But it's totally possible because it only involves basically the teams I just mentioned. So when the playoff does expand, I think it will be better for college football. But right now, it's when you have 4 teams in there, and basically everyone's college football playoff predictions are the same 4 teams, or they pick within a group of 5 or 6 teams that have already made the playoff year in and year out, particularly Alabama and Clemson. And now you throw in there Ohio State because they seem to be a regular at this point as well. They've made it a handful of times, and they've won it before. Of course, Alabama and Clemson have won it before, and aside from 1 year for each of them, Alabama and Clemson have made every single Final Four. Now, that's just due to great coaching, of course. You have Nick Saban at Bama and Dabo Swinney over at Clemson. They recruit the highest level in the country, and year out, these guys are churning out NFL factories worth of players to get them to the college football playoff and win their conference. But really, who's going to challenge these teams this year? And I'll go conference by conference. And if you notice, I didn't even mention the Pac-12. This is why we have a problem with the playoff, and that's why I'm for expansion. Now, are you going to end up getting more SEC teams in there? Yeah, it's totally possible. But at least if you expand the playoff, there might be some stipulations where they automatically take the Power 5 champions, as in they take all the conference champions from the Big 10, Big 12, ACC, SEC, and the Pac-12. The Group of Five is another case. And really, you're only paying attention to Central Florida, Boise State, Cincinnati. That's pretty much it. And UCF and Boise State just played on Thursday night, with UCF coming all the way. They were down, I think it was 24-0, and they came all the way back at home to beat Boise State. So there goes Boise State's 1% chance to make the playoff. It's gone already. UCF now has a 1.5% chance to make the playoff just because they're a Group of 5 team. But on another side note, they are among other teams such as Cincinnati, BYU, and Houston that the Big 12 is looking at right now to expand because they're going to lose Texas and Oklahoma. But before I get sidetracked, the playoff needs to get expanded. I don't know. I mean, it's bound to happen. We've always said it was bound to happen. Once you put 4 teams in there, back in the 2014-15 season, you're bound to have expansion in the college football playoff. So when is it going to happen? We don't know. There's already been rumblings that it's not going to happen within the next few years, and they were initially saying 12 teams. Now it seems like there's distrust among the committee members, and now they're going to go down to 8 teams. 8 teams is fine with me. Make it 8. 12 might be a little bit excessive. I mean, the FCS playoffs are 16, 32 teams. You have multiple rounds, or more than multiple rounds, really. You have a full-fledged tournament. Make it 8. That's fine. They have quarters, semis, and finals. You have your chances for the upset, but the best team ultimately will probably still win. But if you throw 12 teams in there, then you have teams that have byes, and all of a sudden, you could be, if you're not a top 2 team in the country and you're number 3, or what would it be if you're number 5? I think it would be if you're number 5 in a 12-team bracket, you got to play the 12th seed. And it's like you're the number 5 team in the country, and you can get knocked out in the first round. I mean, it's like that in basketball. Don't get me wrong, but still, that's basketball. This is football. You only play once a week. You can't play multiple games in a week. So that's your biggest problem. And Ohio State already put again, we saw it on Thursday. Ohio State almost got, not that they were going to get knocked out of the playoff in the first week, but we almost saw what we wanted to see finally in a return to form in college football, which was upsets and these crazy games to happen right away. Ohio State went on the road and played Minnesota on Thursday. Things weren't looking too good. They were, Minnesota led at halftime. I think it was 14-10 at halftime. They were hosting the Buckeyes, and the Buckeyes, come out with a new quarterback, C.J. Stroud, after Justin Fields left for the NFL. They still have that, all these wide receivers though: Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. They still have a talented running back group, Master Teague, and the new freshman now, Trevion Williams. I mean, Ohio State is just absolutely loaded. Don't forget about the defense, which, led by Haskell Garrett up front, had more of a pass rush on Thursday night. So Ohio State is still loaded, and you're figuring, okay, they're just going to run through Minnesota. Their only challenges this year are probably going to be Oregon, which is an out-of-conference game. And again, I'll bring it back to the out-of-conference game conversation. That is such a good thing. The fact that we have those out-of-conference games. Then now you could see a team like Oregon come into the horseshoe next week and get a statement win that could put the Pac-12 back into the playoff conversation. And it could throw a wrench into Ohio State's plans, or it'll be a good loss for Oregon, and it'll just be an even better win for Ohio State, and they'll basically clinch the playoff status, pretty much after 2 weeks. But we saw it on Thursday. We almost had an upset, and that would have that would have really sparked conversation where maybe you don't need expansion. People who are against expansion are, the ones that prefer the BCS method, where just play every game straight up, and then you don't need a tournament, and you eventually get the top 2 teams back in there, and that might be better for college football because it's more exclusive to play for a national championship, and you don't get the same 4, 5, 6 teams competing for the same 4 spots every single season. There'd be more pressure on these teams to win day in and day out because you only take the top 2 teams. Now I understand that argument. The problem is, you've already put the playoff into place. You're not going to go backwards, first of all. And second of all, I think Thursday proved it. I know Ohio State still won, but Thursday still proved that there are chances for these upsets. And I think Ohio State is a exception. I mean, you look at Alabama and Clemson, of course. I mean, they run through their conferences as well, but we've seen cases where 2 SEC teams have got in before. Alabama and Georgia got in the one year. Then they played each other in the national championship. And one good thing about the SEC's dominance, we saw last year Texas A&M only lose to Alabama. And now they play in the same division, but Texas A&M did not make the playoff because they didn't play for a conference title game. So I think they're still trying to emphasize winning your conference. But Minnesota looks legit. And in the case of Ohio State, I think they're going to be challenged this year. They are the exception right now because they have not lost a Big Ten game under Ryan Day, which is frankly absurd. So as far as the playoff is concerned this year, we're still early, but we have a chance. We have a better chance now for some upsets because not only can these teams get picked off by their own conference foes, these out-of-conference games early on are going to be big factors in the playoff race. In the case of Ohio State, they play Oregon next week. In the case of Alabama, they take on Miami in Atlanta today. And Georgia will play Clemson. So you need more of this early on. Now, granted, when the SEC expands in a couple of years, I don't know how many conference games you're going to play, or if there's going. I know the Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12 formed some kind of alliance, which will have something to do with scheduling, but there's more to it, of course, and it was basically a response to the SEC expanding. So in the case of their scheduling, they want to have more out-of-conference games early on between the 3 conferences, and create these more fan-friendly matchups where early season college football is not dominated by Alabama taking on or actually in the case of Thursday night, Utah taking on Weber State, stuff like that, where you're not playing these FCS teams or you're not paying these FCS teams to come to your house and take a beating, every week 1 or week 2 of the season. So Ohio State will dominate the Big Ten, and frankly, I'll give you my college football playoff picks later. I think they are going to win the Big Ten. I can't see anybody beating them, but Thursday night gave me a little glimmer of hope that there's going to be some challengers to the teams such as Ohio State. Maybe we'll see it today with Alabama, Clemson, and Georgia. Obviously, they're going to play each other today, and I've already made the case that if you have games like this, you're going to knock somebody out of the playoff right away. I think so. And if that is the case, then I think we're in for a wild college football season, and we're not necessarily going to automatically see Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma in your Final Four. Might throw the Pac-12 in there. Could a second Big Ten team get in this year? Maybe somebody different, or even just, heck, I think what most fans want, different teams. Is North Carolina or Miami, can they take down Clemson in the ACC? The Big 12, is it Iowa State's time? I mean, don't forget, Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma won the Big 12 again last year, but they didn't make the playoff. They off to a slow start. And Iowa State gave them a run for their money. This could be the year they actually upstage them. Pac-12 getting back into it. I mean, Oregon, can they win a third straight Pac-12 title, but in a legit season this year, can they actually make playoff noise? It's possible. Is USC as good as advertised with their quarterback, Keaton Slovis? Is UCLA... Heck, if UCLA beats LSU today, is UCLA actually for real? Are they going to make a run of the Pac-12 title and throw a wrench into the playoffs plans? Because LSU could bounce back this year. I know that's SEC, but LSU was at least a different team a couple years ago in 2019 when they went undefeated and won a national title. But maybe they're back in the playoff picture this year. Maybe they actually fully bounce back and they really compete in that loaded SEC West division. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here before we even get into the full crux of these college football games here in Week 1. Pretty much our big games from before Saturday were Ohio State knocking off Minnesota on the road, so big win, and they've already after a slow start they had their new quarterback already. So you figured Ohio State changes quarterbacks, they might hit a rough patch here. Same with Alabama, Bryce Young this year, replacing Mac Jones. But again, Mac Jones was in the system. I know he was only a starter for 1 year, but he was in that system. So Alabama has gone year after year with these quarterbacks who they've pretty much developed the entire time. The Jalen Hurts of the world, Tua Tagovailoa, and then now Mac Jones, and then Bryce Young, who's only been here. It's only his second season with the program, so we'll see how he does against Miami today. Just a quick reminder, of course, that this show is brought to you by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Find them on Instagram at harborjujitsu.com for our latest schedule. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday, bringing you no-gi basic fundamentals, no-gi intermediate classes, MMA training, and, of course, sparring and live training as well. I'm excited for today. I'll tell you what, I'm very, very excited today for this college football docket, and I'll give you a preview of my games so far as we try to get off to a good start in our pick segment later. But Penn State at Wisconsin, Indiana at Iowa, Louisiana at Texas, Georgia against Clemson, LSU at UCLA. I didn't even mention Alabama at Miami. They're not one of my games today, but that's another big game on the docket. I mean, the schedule makers did a good job as far as what they were going to do for Week 1 this year. Now, you have a couple other games. You have Texas A&M is playing Kent State. If Florida's playing Florida Atlantic, I mean, I get that. There's some other ones. Iowa State's hosting Northern Iowa. Tomorrow, actually, on Sunday, you have Notre Dame playing Florida State on the road. Now, that is fascinating. We even talk about Notre Dame. They made the playoff last year, but don't forget, they were a part of the ACC temporarily. They're back to an independent this year. They're already ranked number 9 in the country. So it'll be interesting to see. Their schedule still is ACC heavy. And I know we didn't really dive into that, but they do play Wisconsin. They have to play a top 8 team at the moment, of course, Cincinnati. They're not at USC. They host USC. So they have some they have some interesting games here. Now, do I think Notre Dame again? Is that going to make the playoff any different? Is Notre Dame fighting for the playoff every year? Technically, they are, because they're always highly respected under Brian Kelly. They made the playoff last year, but now they're back to an independent. Notre Dame's one of those teams where they can't afford more than one loss either. And again, nobody with 2 losses has ever made the playoff anyway. But the way I see it, Notre Dame is going to be firmly in the playoff conversation as well. So maybe you have another team in there, but it's not really giving fresh eyes on the playoff. You're not giving the playoff a fresh coat of paint, because Notre Dame is one of those staples of college football, and they've made the playoff a couple times previously. All right, we will step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we're going to dive into some of these national championship odds and the Heisman odds, so you guys can start placing some bets down on some big-time quarterbacks, maybe some running backs as well, and we'll give you the favorites to take home the college football playoff national championship. So we'll basically continue this conversation on the playoff. And then, of course, later I will give you my first 5 picks of the season And they're presented by Raw Health Canine Food, all natural, best quality meats for your dog at rawhealthcaninefood.com. So I can't wait to dive into those 5 games as well. Don't go away. It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Back here on College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. College football playoff talk already. I mean, it's kind of insane. I mean, I know we have week 0, and then we have week 1 where everything truly kicks off. But isn't that just annoying that even I have to do it? That if so and so wins, so and so loses, the college football playoff hopes them are done. All the more reason for expansion, folks, I'm telling you, because once you lose one game, you're on thin ice. Back in the day, it was the BCS. You lose one game, you're basically done. There's no way you can compete for a national championship. And a lot of these great teams can compete for a national championship. But because they have 2 losses, they can't make the Final Four. So that, to me, is as I said before, the biggest reason for expansion to, at the minimum, 8 teams. Do I want to see it past 8 teams? Not necessarily. But generally, you can get those 2 lost teams in there within the top 8. Now, speaking of the national championship, as we give pretty much an overarching preview of college football this season, I'll run down some odds for you via BetOnline AG in terms of who the odds to win this year's national championship game. Now, of course, it's a long list, and even my Rutgers Scarlet Knights happen to be on there at 500 to 1. So if you want to put a couple shekels on them, that'd be much appreciated to me. Of course, support the Scarlet Knights. Just kidding, of course. Don't waste your money. But in terms of the favorite right now, of course, it's Alabama, 13 to 5. Clemson is listed at 21 to 4, and then I mentioned these teams before. Georgia and Oklahoma both 13 to 2. Ohio State has 7 to 1 odds, and then Texas A&M 22 to 1. So basically, the teams I mentioned in the first segment, as far as the 4, 5, 6 teams that are going to be in contention, and the ones that are basically running things this year in college football that have the most say in terms of their playoff chances, it's those 6, and they had the 6 best odds. And then after that, you have Florida, Iowa State, and LSU all listed at 33 to 1, while Texas, despite their struggles and not getting over the hump, but they have Steve Sarkisian now as the head coach, they're 40 to 1. Miami, who's playing Alabama today, they're listed at 50 to 1. North Carolina 50 to 1. Same thing with Oregon, USC, and Wisconsin. That is where I'd say I'm cutting off the list. I'm not going any lower than that in terms of placing a bet on anybody else to win the title. Auburn, 60 to 1. I don't think Auburn is ready for prime time again yet. They have a brand new head coach. The biggest question is their quarterback in Bo Nix, who's the 3rd year as a starter. He had a big sophomore slump last year. I know they just got, I think it was TJ Finley is their other new quarterback who transferred in from LSU. But Nix is still the starter. And then after that, you have Notre Dame, 66 to 1, which is not terrible. They might be the only team that I'm willing to go down that low for. Cincinnati 80 to 1. You can get good value with that with Penn State, who's also 80 to 1. But Cincinnati, they have to make the playoff first. A group of 5 team has to make the playoff first. Utah 80 to 1, Washington 80 to 1, and then you start getting into the triple digits. Arizona State, Indiana, Florida State, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, Oklahoma State, Ole Miss, Pittsburgh, Tennessee. I can't believe Tennessee even has this good of an odds at 100 to 1, and UCLA 100 to 1. Then from there, all right, we'll stop there. But pretty much anybody below Wisconsin, I would not place any money on. Maybe aside, the exceptions are Notre Dame and Penn State. We'll throw Penn State in there just because they always give Ohio State a run for their money, and if Penn State actually does have a bounce-back season, they could actually make the Big Ten championship game. And for all we know, James Franklin's going to lead the Nittany Lions to their second title under his watch. And generally, the Big Ten winner is going to get in, except if you're Penn State a couple years ago when they had 2 losses, they beat Ohio State, but they won the Big Ten with 2 losses, and Ohio State got in anyway. So there you go. There's more problems that, I think we brought that up last year as well, because it was bound for a similar situation last year in a couple different scenarios. So as far as who I'm going to place the smart money on, I mean, of course, it's hard to pick outside that top 6, which is Bama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Texas A&M. But I'm still a big Florida Gators man. They're 33-1, and I'm surprised they're actually that good, or they're that high up on this list, because I figured they would drop a little bit. Again, their only competition in the SEC East is Georgia, but Florida lost a lot of weapons last year, including quarterback Kyle Trask. They lost tight end Kyle Pitts and wide receiver Kadarius Toney, and they replaced that with basically Emory Jones is their new quarterback, dual threat quarterback. So maybe he'll keep Florida afloat for now. I think if you're gonna take one of the top teams right now, I really think Iowa State is good value. If you're not gonna pick the mainstays, or if you're not going to go below the Wisconsin line, which is, the Notre Dames and Penn States of the world at 80-1, Iowa State is good value at 33-1 in terms of winning the national title. Because, again, you look at the Big 12, it's Oklahoma and everybody else. Now, is Texas for real? It remains to be seen. Hudson Card, their new quarterback, and Steve Sarkisian's offense. It's a young guy, but I will tell you what, a young quarterback. But Sark has a little something, and I think Texas is going to be very, very successful under Sarkisian from what he's proved as a coordinator. I know he did not have a good stint with USC. He had his personal problems, but don't forget how good he was at Washington before he moved on. So I think he will be the right guy for that program. But as far as year one right away, Big 12 contention, but not playoff contention. So I'm steering away from Texas in that sense. And then you look at the rest of the Big 12, who else do you have? Oklahoma State, I guess. It's really Oklahoma and Iowa State here. And because Oklahoma's odds are at 13-2, I wouldn't mind throwing a few bucks on Iowa State. The Cyclones, hey, you have Brock Purdy back at quarterback. And, of course, you have a Heisman contender in Breece Hall at running back. Breece Hall could carry this program to a Big 12 title. Now, as long as they don't lose more than one game, I think Iowa State is going to make the playoff. Now, am I actually going to pick them to make the playoff right now? No. But they had the best shot in the Big 12 outside of the Oklahoma Sooners. So 33-1, not a bad bet right there in terms of picking your national champion or putting some money on your national champion. The other teams within the ACC, and again, this is a matter of if Miami or North Carolina is going to upset Clemson, which I really don't foresee right now, despite the fact Clemson now turns to a new quarterback in DJ Uiagalelei, replacing Trevor Lawrence. Miami and North Carolina both 50-1. I just don't see it. Maybe the Miami and North Carolina don't play Clemson, so one of them is probably bound to play them in the conference title game. Just a matter of if, again, it's that one loss mark. If you have two losses, you're basically screwed. So 50-1, good odds for, it's good value, but I'm not totally sold on them taking the extra step to do it this year. Now, don't get me wrong. The conferences are a little bit more open this year, and they're going to be fun to watch. You're going to have a little bit more excitement. It's not going to be a done deal by week 4. These teams are going to be in contention. And the fact that the Pac-12 is actually pretty close with Oregon, USC. If UCLA actually knocks off LSU today, and then you look at Washington and Utah, there are there's some changes around here. So again, the odds right now: Bama 13-5, Clemson 21-4, Georgia 13-2, Oklahoma's also 13-2, Ohio State 7-1 odds. A&M 22-1, Florida 33-1, Iowa State 33-1. Same with LSU, and then Texas 40-1, and then the 50-1 odd range is Miami, North Carolina, Oregon, USC, and Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin might be the only team to knock off Ohio State in the Big Ten. Other than Penn State, as I don't see Michigan doing it again. I never. I don't see Michigan doing it this year because Harbaugh's never done it. I think Ohio State's still too good. Now, could this be a much closer game this year? Sure, but that's ways away, of course, folks. But as far as the national championship odds, those are the listed ones right now as of this week. And I would say your smart money outside of the big boys is 33-1. Put that money down on the Iowa State Cyclones. Now, as far as the Heisman is concerned, the updated ones as of Friday, it's a lot of quarterbacks, as usual, because the Heisman has basically become a quarterback award. So if you're talking about what player do I have to watch out for this year, well, frankly, it's going to be a lot of quarterbacks. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I will give you this. Spencer Rattler is the favorite, 5-1. Bryce Young, how about this? He has surged up these boards as of late. Alabama's new quarterback, in case you didn't know. He was the top quarterback recruit when he came in. Everyone thought that there'd be a great shot he would start last year over Mac Jones. And don't forget, Alabama still has a loaded offense. Namely, it's Aggie Hall, a wide receiver, and of course John Mechie. I mean, Alabama basically churns out, at least 2 NFL wide receivers per year at this point with these tandems. And so Young's going to have people to throw to. Alabama still has a tremendous offensive line. They have a great defense. They're the number 1 team in the country. So yeah, Bryce Young definitely has a chance to win the Heisman. I mean, he's got to play well, of course. We haven't seen him play in full game action yet. He had brief appearances last year in garbage time. But he's got 9-1 odds. So the odds makers, Vegas likes Bryce Young right now. He's tied for second in the odds because you look at JT Daniels, quarterback over at Georgia. Now that he's finally at the full-time starter, they're giving him a little bit more credit. It took him till mid-season plus last year to crack the starting lineup. Now I don't know why it took so long. I know there were some phantom injury concerns. He was obviously coming off the torn ACL at USC when he transferred in, so I get all that. But for some reason, he just didn't crack the lineup till later in the year. But Georgia saw dividends with their offense with him back there pulling the trigger. He has 9-1 odds. C.J. Stroud, we just saw him on Thursday against Minnesota. Ohio State's new signal caller. If you go back to when the season was over, when they initially had the new Heisman odds, he didn't even have odds back in January. But then, late July, he was at 10-1. He's now at 11-1 odds as of this week, or actually as of yesterday, as of Friday. Stroud looked pretty good in the second half. Now, he struggled. First game jitters, I'll give him that. Don't worry about it. I'm a big fan of C.J. Stroud. I think he is going to be Justin Fields-like. Is he going to be as good as Fields? Probably not. But I think Stroud is a solid quarterback, and he's going to be, I already ranked him as my top quarterback in the Big Ten, and he didn't even play a single snap until Thursday. Now, he struggled in the first half, but he ended up with 4 touchdowns, and he looked pretty darn good. And plus, he's got the weapons around him. And we mentioned the wide receiver factory that Ohio State has as well, with that 3-headed monster, plus the other 3 guys on the depth chart that I'd even mentioned before. And then you look at at least the 2 and 3 running backs he has as well. So, and of course, it's Ryan Day, folks, calling the plays. So I think Stroud is going to be fine. So that's good. That's good odds, and he actually has good value. DJ Uiagalelei, Clemson's quarterback at 12-1. Same goes for Matt Corral and Sam Howell, quarterbacks at Ole Miss and UNC respectively. Howell's my pick, by the way. If I'm picking the Heisman, I'm a huge fan of Sam Howell, and the fact that his odds went down since they initially came out in January. He was listed at 7-1, so at that point he was tied for second in terms of the Heisman odds. Rattler's been the favorite pretty much all the way through. Aside from July, where they actually made Daniels the odds-on favorite. But as far as Sam Howell is concerned, he went from 7-1 to 14-1. Now he's settled in at 12-1 odds. So I think that's great value for a guy who I think is personally going to win the Heisman. He's only gotten better. He had a stellar freshman year. He got better last year as a sophomore. And North Carolina is going to firmly be in the ACC race with Clemson. Again, they don't play Clemson until they play them in the ACC championship game if they happen to get there. So I like Sam Howell a lot. Keaton Slovis at USC, he's at 20-1, and then now we finally get a non-quarterback, Bijan Robinson. So if you're going to look at running backs or a non-quarterback to take home this award, it's probably going to be your best bet is probably going to be Bijan Robinson over at Texas, because this dude averaged like 7 yards a carry last year. And he had less than 100 carries. He's fresh. He had over 700 yards, handful of touchdowns. He's going to be a mainstay in that Texas Longhorns offense. And the fact that he has Steve Sarkisian as his offensive coordinator now, yeah, I'm going to say Bijan Robinson is going to get a lot of touches, a lot of production this year. At 22-1 odds, he is good value. So if you're looking for a non-quarterback, he's the guy. Breece Hall, I mentioned before, from Iowa State. He's listed at 28-1. And aside from those 2 guys, I'm telling you, folks, it is literally all quarterbacks. Tariq King over Miami, Emory Jones of Florida, 22-1 and 25-1 odds, respectively. Graham Mertz of Wisconsin, he's the quarterback who starred last season He had a perfect game against Illinois, and then they ended up getting COVID. He was out for 2 games. Wisconsin's schedule got messed up. He's at 28-1 odds, and we're still in the quarterbacks, folks. You got Brock Purdy of Iowa State, Desmond Ridder, Cincinnati, and Jaden Daniels of Arizona State. Actually, he's a running back, sorry. But Purdy, Ridder, and Daniels, all 33-1 odds. Another non-quarterback, Kyron Williams, dark horse here. I mean, he's low on the list in terms of these odds, but Notre Dame is going to go through that run game this year a little bit more. I know they have Jack Cohn now, the Wisconsin transfer at quarterback. He is the starter, and we'll see him go up against Florida State tomorrow. But as far as he's a good signal caller. But the fact of the matter is Notre Dame's offense is going to run through that run game and the production of Kyron Williams. He's at 33-1 odds. Mackenzie Milton. I mean, I'll tell you what. This is a long shot. If you want a long shot, and I'll give you a long shot. Right now, Sam Howell's my pick, so I'm putting my money on Sam Howell at 12-1. But if you want a long shot, folks, at the Heisman Trophy this year, you might want to pay attention to Mackenzie Milton. Mackenzie Milton, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Nobody was really talking about a couple years ago when he was at Central Florida. Then he had his production was through the roof. He has that devastating leg injury. The guy looks like he's never going to play again. He's replaced at UCF by Dylan Gabriel, who, by the way, led that comeback effort for UCF against Boise State on Thursday. He transferred out. He hasn't played in, I think it's now 2 years. He hasn't played. So this is boom or bust potential right here. But he transfers to Florida State, wins the job. He's going to start tomorrow. And if Milton is anything like what he was at Central Florida, the fact now that he's at a Power 5 school, and it's nothing against UCF. I'm a huge UCF fan. But the fact that he plays for Florida State, a big brand in college football, and if he is that good, Florida State not only could be a dark horse in the ACC, Mackenzie Milton is your dark horse Heisman candidate. But he's got this is assuming he's going to get back to the level he was when he was at UCF. Now, it remains to be seen. You're coming off a leg injury like that where, your career might be over. I'm just glad he's playing again. As long as he plays well, the fact that he's actually playing is a success story. But if he plays well, then it'll be a phenomenal story. If he plays to where he was a couple years ago, it's going to be it's going to be the story of the decade for Mackenzie Milton. But he's at 33-1, so that's not a bad bet if you're looking for a long shot in these Heisman odds as well. Then a couple other guys listed at 40-1, and then I'll stop there. Brian Robinson Jr. over in Alabama, and of course Malik Willis over at Liberty. He's a quarterback, and he is now getting a lot of first round draft hype for next season. So, but again, he plays for Liberty, so I don't know how much juice he's going to get throughout the season. Now, Liberty was great last year; they could very well be great again this year. But again, it's Liberty. I don't know if he's going to get enough juice for the Heisman conversation. So, again, my pick, definitely Sam Howell over at North Carolina, 12-1 odds. But your favorite right now is, of course, Spencer Rattler over at Oklahoma, playing in Lincoln Riley's offense. It's almost like he's almost a shoo-in to at least get to New York alongside probably Howell, in my opinion. And then you look at one of the other quarterbacks, and I don't know how many guys are going to invite this year, but it's probably going to be all quarterbacks, sans Bijan Robinson over at Texas, or maybe even Breece Hall at Iowa State. And don't sleep on Matt Corral as well over at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin's offense is predicated on just passing. You saw the explosion last year, and I think Corral could do that again this season. But once again, I'm locking in my pick right now for Heisman, Sam Howell over at North Carolina. All right, we'll step aside, take one last break. On the other side, we will dive into my 5-pack of picks and get you ready for kickoff here later today. Of course, our picks are brought to you by Raw Health Canine Food, and we can't wait to dive in to this 5-pack just around the corner. It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Back here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko, as we dive into now our 5-pack of picks as we lead you into the kickoff for Week 1 here in 2021, the full slate here on this glorious Saturday afternoon. Just to remind you once again, of course, our pick segment is brought to you by Raw Health Canine Food. Raw Health Canine Food is a family-owned and operated small business that puts your canine's health first. The food is homemade from the best quality USDA-inspected meats. There are never any preservatives, chemicals, or steroids utilized in these products. From your puppy to your police canine, Raw Health Canine Food provides the best for your animal every single day. You can find them at 108 West Kings Highway in Mount Ephraim in New Jersey, or find them on Instagram at Raw Health Canine. Go to rawhealthcaninefood.com to place your order today. Raw Health Canine Food. Feed your dog the food it deserves. So simply put, the slate today is pretty darn good. It really is. And I know I'm a Big Ten guy. And I know Rutgers is going to be rescheduled towards today. And I'm not putting them on my picks today. They were basically a 2-touchdown favorite against Temple, and I'll just advise today, I don't think they're going to cover that. I think they're going to win. They'll beat the Temple Owls and get my Scarlet Knights off to a good start, but I don't think they are going to cover. They'll pull away. I think they are going to pull away in the end, but they're not going to win by 2 touchdowns. But that was a little side note, just for myself and anybody out there who's also a Rutgers alum or fan, of course. All right, so we're going to dive into this first game now. Penn State at Wisconsin. Wisconsin listed as a 5.5-point favorite. That over-under at 50. I think that over actually is going to hit. Sneaky. That will be a sneaky player right there. But as far as where I'm leaning right now, I'm going Wisconsin at -5.5. And that's only because they are at home. Camp Randall is going to be rocking. They're finally, since fans are back, the home field advantages are going to come back. Again, I know last year there were some exceptions where you went into a usually dominant home area for a team, and some of those teams had decent capacity crowds, if not full capacity at some point last year. But I'm going to roll with Wisconsin at home, -5.5. over Penn State. Now, I like Wisconsin a lot because they have not only do they have an easier schedule over in the West, they're bound for the Big Ten Championship game, and they are actually my pick to get to the Big Ten Championship game against Ohio State. Penn State, I think, is going to be vastly improved this year. They're already ranked top 20 here in the preseason, heading into Week 1. Sean Clifford, one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. They got off that 0-5 start last season, but they ended up winning 4 in a row to finish off 2020, which is a very, very weird Jekyll and Hyde type of year for the Nittany Lions in 2020. But this is a very big test early on, and I like the fact that the Big Ten scheduled this cross-divisional matchup as the first game. I mean, this has a lot of implications moving forward. It's going to be a statement win for either team here. So I'm going to go with Wisconsin, though, -5.5. I think this will be more of a high-scoring game. I think you're going to see a return to form for Graham Mertz at quarterback for Wisconsin. And, of course, they still have a stout running game and a beefy line up front on both sides of the football. -5.5 is just enough for me to say, all right, Wisconsin is going to cover that. They'll win by a touchdown here. I think we're going to have a back-and-forth game. I think it's going to be a close game. It'll be a good game, but I do like Wisconsin at -5.5. Indiana at Iowa. I know we're stuck with the Big Ten again over here, but it was at -3 when I put it down. It's moved to -4 now, so a lot of money is going towards the Hawkeyes. So we had it at -3. I'll take that. I think we are going to have, again, this is going to be another close game. It's number 17 Indiana and number 18 Iowa, but it's in Iowa City. It's at Kinnick Stadium. And we know the Hawkeyes do have a pretty good home field advantage as well. Iowa is the other contender over in the Big Ten West. Indiana could be Ohio State's biggest challenger in the East Division this year. Michael Penix Jr. is back at quarterback after tearing his ACL last year. So it remains to be seen how good he is going to be, if he is going to return to form as well, and also if he can improve. I mean, he was really good last year, don't get me wrong, and he had some good wide receivers, but don't let the hype fool you. The stat line, I should say, don't let the stat line fool you, actually, because the stat line is not, it's not otherworldly like how we describe Michael Penix Jr. He was very productive, though, and I think he's probably, other than C.J. Stroud, he's the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Iowa is going to have to run through their run game, literally, their run game. And, of course, playing stout defense. I think this is bound for maybe the under here. And I talked about this with our good buddy Rich Quinones on Back Your Play on Thursday, actually. The over-run is only at 46. So the odds makers are expecting, maybe one of those 24-21 type of games. We could see that. I mean, again, we saw on Thursday, it looked like it was going to be more of a lower scoring game between Ohio State and Minnesota, but then Ohio State ends up winning 45-31. That could be the case here, but I want to lean the under here. I'm thinking maybe a 24-17 type of game here, which would allow, of course, that would mean Iowa covers here, and I am going to go Iowa -3 here. Iowa would cover and would hit that under, so sneaky play there for that under at 46. I think we might see a 24-17 type of game, one of those more old school Big Ten games where you have a lot of running, a lot of tough defense, some wacky stuff happens as well. I mean, if you watched the Nebraska-Illinois game last week in Week 0, where of course Nebraska got off to a bad start with Scott Frost. Scott Frost again is still on the hot seat here. That the first score of that game was a safety on a weird play, on a punt return. I mean, that's just Big Ten football there for you folks. So I do like Iowa -4, so I'll take that. Sorry, it's listed at -4 now. We got it at -3, so I'll take the Iowa Hawkeyes right there. All right, Louisiana at Texas. Now, some of these lines have shifted from when I gave my picks to Rich on Back Your Play, of course, earlier this week right here at AM 1490. I had Louisiana +8 at Texas. Now, the Raging Cajuns are 23rd in the country, and Texas is already getting a lot of respect early on. They're already at number 21. Haven't played a game yet. Louisiana at least had a good season last year. Texas just has a new head coach and a new quarterback. So what exactly are we doing here with Texas? They're going to be as good as advertised. They are now favored by 9. That line moved. So people like that Texas -8. They moved to -9. We'll keep it at +8 from when we locked it in. So we have Louisiana +8. And I'm sticking with the Raging Cajuns on the road. Now, do I think they're going to win outright? I can't say they're going to win outright. I think Texas is going to get I guess you can call it a quote-unquote statement win, and they'll get a win here. This game's at 4:30, by the way, today. I think Texas is going to win, but Louisiana, I mean, that's just a big gap right there, +8. More than a touchdown. And I think Louisiana is better than that. So that's why we'll stick with Louisiana at +8. I could have been, that guy who changed his pick or modified the pick based on the line moving to 9 now. But I'll stick with the 8. We'll be fair. Because we locked in our picks earlier this week. So I like Louisiana at +8 at Texas today. Over-under, by the way, set at 58 as well. All right, here we go. Big ones now. Georgia and Clemson. This line has not moved. Still at 3, -3 for Clemson. Over-under, the only. So we mentioned this early in the week with our good buddy Rich. Over-under's at 50.5. You mean to tell me with those two offenses, there's going to be 50 points combined? So we're talking 27-24. Realistically, that's all you need. That would hit the over. Over-under is at 50.5. And of course, if my math is correct, 27 plus 24 is 51. And that would hit the over. And you mean to tell me these two teams are not going to have a score like that at minimum? Maybe by the end of the third quarter. Heck, halftime maybe? I mean, these are two offenses that can really sling it. You got two good quarterbacks. And Georgia's offense is finally in the 21st century. So I would slam that over right now. As far as the line is concerned, I'm picking Georgia to win this game outright. Now, you look at the line at 3. It's tough to cover that, so that means they're going to push, or they're somehow going to lose by 2 points or 1 point based on some weird scoring throughout the game. But I like Georgia to win this. I think Georgia is just going to win this game outright. It's as simple as that. And I mentioned before how I think the loser of this game is bound to miss the playoff. I really think that's going to happen. Loser is not going to make the playoff. So there's a lot riding on this game. That's why I think we're going to get a shootout. We're going to get a back and forth type of affair, and it's in the Bank of America Stadium, home of the Carolina Panthers, over in Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's technically neutral site, but a little closer to Clemson. So you're probably going to see more Clemson faithful at this one. This is 7:30 tonight. I'm leaning Georgia, so I like Georgia +3 in this contest. JT Daniels going to start making his Heisman case later tonight. Final game, LSU and UCLA. This line has moved, by the way, folks. People are putting money. See, I told Rich earlier in the week, I like UCLA +3 at home. It's now 2.5. The money's going. Money's going over to UCLA. Bruins got a dominating victory over Hawaii to kick off the year. Again, it was Hawaii, but LSU's coming cross-country. They're displaced because of the hurricane. They're ranked 16th already in the country after a 5-5 campaign last year. A lot of pressure on Ed Orgeron and company. There is so much less pressure on Chip Kelly right now. Because, if they lose to UCLA, if UCLA loses to LSU, it's like, what are you going to do? SEC opponent. I know they came into your house, but you know what? You have the Pac-12 schedule left to go. All right, you can still compete in the Pac-12. If they beat LSU, folks, Chip Kelly is going to be the most talked about coach come Monday morning. It's going to happen. For some reason, I love their running game. Zach Charbonnet, the Michigan transfer, had 160 yards last week, 3 touchdowns, just 6 carries. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, their quarterback, a little bit better last week. I mean, he only completed 10 of 20 passes, but he's right there. And he showed a little improvement. LSU's got a tough defense. Or hopefully, you would think an improved defense. Plus, they have the offense. Max Johnson, they're back there at quarterback. So LSU's due for a bounce back year, but I think UCLA's going to win this game outright. It's in the Rose Bowl. And LSU coming cross country. I have a funny feeling, folks. Take UCLA +3. All right, recap of the picks real quick. Wisconsin -5.5 over Penn State. Iowa -3 over Indiana. Louisiana +8 over Texas. Georgia +3 against Clemson. And as we just mentioned, UCLA +3 over LSU. That's going to do it for me. Enjoy the games today, folks. This has been College Football Pick'em. I am Nick Kosko right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.